Okay, so fast following the last video I did, which was talking about it had zodiacs in it, the zodiac, and a few little bits and pieces in it. I talked about the Magi, but to a very, very small amount. Now, I did mention at the end of that last video that I had a real conviction to read a book, this book, which is by Ken Johnson, and it's actually called The Pre-Flood Origins of Astrology. Okay, now I had a real conviction, and I wrote it down actually after covering off the last dream, that because of these zodiacs that were in the dream I had a real feeling that I needed to cover off stuff to do with the zodiac and those kind of things. So, and also to do with, there was another aspect, so that's what I wanted to do anyway. So I just wanted to go through some bits and pieces around that, just to a small degree, and I needed to read this book before I did it. It's a very small book, actually. It's, I don't know how many pages it is, actually. 100 and, just over 100. Yeah, just over 100 pages. It's quite a small book, actually. I have mentioned it on a previous video, but what I wanted to take us through was basically a continuation of the last one. So I did say, look, the video's got to an hour now. If I go through this, it's going to be another half hour, 15 minutes, whatever it was, depending on what I wanted to do. I didn't quite know what I was going to cover off. So I'm going to cover off some bits and pieces. I'm going to start from this book. I'm literally just going to be reading the book as well, just so you know. I'll obviously be throwing in my own thoughts on certain things, but there's going to be quite a few different scriptures as we go. It's talking about the Magi. So the Magi are obviously are also known as the three wise men. Although there's no indication that there was three, there was just three gifts that were given to to celebrate obviously Jesus' birth. So I'm going to take you through that. So hopefully this will be something you've not heard of maybe too much. I did find it really, really interesting. Now, once we've covered off that bit and we're talking about the Magi, and we're actually going to be talking about stories that were passed down through the church fathers. So those that actually were only like, let's say 100, 130 years beyond the actual event. So no, 100 to 160, something like that. There'll be various different quotes. So it'll be covering that sort of thing. But it'll be from them. So it's not scripture, of course. It's stuff about the ancient church fathers and what they sort of said at the beginning of the setting up of the church. But obviously a lot of that can be first-hand experience, or it can be, literally like you speaking to your granddad about it. Oh yeah, I was there, that kind of thing. So there's some really, really interesting stuff. I have actually got a book on the ancient church fathers, but I've never got around to reading it. I will get to it at some point. But so we're going to be covering that off. So we're going to be covering off the Magi and the story of them, how they got to obviously getting to see Jesus, the story that happened before that. And then I'm going to go through anyway, not that this does go into a huge amount of detail. I'm going to go through the three gifts that were given and the meaning of those. Then actually we're going to switch completely. And then we're going to get into not so much zodiac signs actually. So I don't really, because there's not really much to them, to be honest, but ancient gods I thought would be interesting. So ancient Greek and like Roman gods, and where they came from, where you can actually track back where they came from. A lot of god sort of worship in the ancient world was actually ancestor worship. There was I don't know, as to use just to throw out an example. So it'd be something like, Achilles, he was this amazing soldier, and he did this, that, and the other, and he was like a god. And then they start sort of praying and stuff to Achilles, even though he was like a human being. Now, I have heard some stuff recently that wasn't even the case anyway. He's a fictional character. I don't know much about that. It's literally just for me to give you an example. Okay. But yeah, we're going to go through all these bits and pieces, and we'll see how we get on. It's quite a few pages to read, so I'll get started. So as I said, I'm literally going to be reading from this book. So all the credit goes to obviously Ken for putting this book together, and all the different various different sources he's used, of course. Which, if you buy the book, you'll see all the sources. Okay, so this part is called Science of the Magi. So I'm starting on page 15. So it says the prophet Isaiah, which of course is, canon scripture. So there is some proper scripture in here as well, but there will be some stuff where it deviates. So the prophet Isaiah predicted that Gentile kings would come and offer Christ gold and frankincense. Matthew recorded the fulfillment of this prophecy. So now I'm quoting that scripture. So this is Isaiah 60 verses 3 and 6. So it says here, and the Gentiles shall come to thy light, and kings to the brightness of thy rising. The multitude of camels shall cover thee. The dromedaries of Midian and Ephah, all they from Sheba shall come, and they shall bring gold and incense. He's put in brackets, frank, incense. I'll cover that off in a minute. And they shall show forth the praises of the Lord. So again, continuing with what he says here. So now, when Jesus was born in Bethlehem this is Matthew 2, verses 1 to 8 now, sorry. He kind of quotes it after you're reading it. It's easier if it's before, because then I know what I'm reading, but I have to flip across sometimes. So Matthew 2, verses 1 to 8. So it says here, now, when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and are come to worship him. When Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, he demanded of them where Christ should be born. And they said unto him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet, and thou, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, art not the least among the princes of Judah. For out of thee shall come a governor that shall rule my people Israel. Then Herod, when he privily called the wise men, inquired of them diligently what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, go and search diligently for the young child, and when ye have found him, bring me word again, that I may come and worship him also. So as I said, Matthew 2, 1 to 8. Now, again, just so you know, Ken does quote King James Version a lot, and I think it was something to do with licensing or something like that. Not aware of any kind of licensing thing, but maybe to do with publishing. I'm not sure. So all of this generally will be in King James Version. Okay. So moving on past that then. So the Greek word translated here as wise men, so it talks about the wise men coming, is actually magos, M-A-G-O-S. It originally meant astrologer or occultist, but later came to mean a high-ranking official in the Persian court. So this is where these guys have come from Persia, which is modern-day Iran. Well, that sort of area. These men followed a star which in some way led them to the infant Jesus. So now we're going to Matthew 2, verses 9 to 13. So we're basically just carrying on from where we just finished. Well, when they had heard the king, they departed, and lo, the star, which they saw in the east, went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. And when they were come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary, his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. And being warned of God in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed into their own country another way. And when they were departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, arise, and take the young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt, and be thou there until I bring thee word. For Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. As I said, Matthew 2, verses 9 to 13. There's another bit here, and then I'm going to jump into some other bits, okay? So the ancient prophet, I never know how to say this one, Balaam, B-A-L-A-A-M, about 1440 BC, gave a prophecy that a star would mark the birth of the true ruler of Israel. So this is me now quoting Numbers 24, verses 16 to 17. He hath said, which heard the words of God and knew the knowledge of the Most High, which saw the vision of the Almighty, falling into a trance, but having his eyes open, I shall see him, but not now. I shall behold him, but not nigh. There shall come a star out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel. Okay, so that is again, this is Ken saying that this relates specifically to, obviously, the star coming out. Yeah, the scepter. So a ruler, coming out of Israel. Right, so there's bits I have to cover off here, just real quick. So I was going to go into the gifts of frankincense and myrrh and bring that back to actually that original one I went through. So, when I went through Isaiah, I said there's multitudes of cover so they come from Midian and Ephah, all of them from Sheba shall come, and they shall bring gold and incense, and they shall give praises to the Lord. So this, again, this is Ken saying, well, this is obviously talking about, them coming to see Jesus. Again, I don't know necessarily these kind of things. I'm just telling you from what he's saying. So the bits where it says frankincense, obviously you've got gold, frankincense, and myrrh, haven't you? So I looked these up. I was just curious. He put frank in brackets before incense, but actually, in saying incense, just incense, it actually covers both myrrh and frankincense. So myrrh was an incense anyway. Okay, so to say gold and incense would cover all three gifts, with those two being incense and gold obviously being gold. So it does match up. And I did also look into some bits. Now, there were some things I'm pretty sure I mentioned it actually in a previous video, the gold, frankincense, and myrrh, and that they represented certain things to do with who Jesus was, and a gift because of who he was. So the gold is said to obviously represent kingship, gold. And I'd heard that somewhere else, quickly Googled it. I use Google a lot in what I go through, so it can just get you straight to the scriptures you want. It's so rapid. It's so brilliant at bringing together all these kind of different scriptures for you very, very quickly. It's very, very helpful. And I'm obviously going to the scriptures and then I'm reading from the scriptures rather than reading off of Google. So just in case it can be corrupted, but it can certainly send you the right direction. If you agree, then you go through it, obviously. So next one, frankincense. So as I said, gold meaning kingship, frankincense meaning a priestly role, and then myrrh is to do with embalming. And I'm going to cover that off, okay? So frankincense first. So the priestly role. Again, and Google confirmed that was the case. I'd heard it somewhere else. It confirmed the same thing. This is what it's thought to represent. So it says, and it's frankincense was an incense that was used in the temple, and it was used on the altar in obviously the holy temple. And it's cited, when I did check this up, it cited Exodus 30, verse 34, and it seemed to be symbolizing the high priest, potentially even deity. But obviously Jesus was both. Okay, and the rising smoke. Now you do hear this in Revelation, where it talks in Revelation about how there's a censer that's poured out, that's filled with the prayers of the saints. So these are all the prayers, that we've got there. I can't remember if it is specifically this. It might be me hearing it from somewhere else, but it's to do with the prayers of basically, to come, come and make you, come to earth, basically. Return. But it's in Revelation. But they used to put this kind of frankincense and stuff like that. And the rising smoke was meant to represent the prayers rising to God in heaven. But I did read that they also used to put incense in with some of their burnt offerings as well. I can't remember what offering it mentioned, but it says about putting in an incense, and that it specifically says about how it's a pleasing aroma to God. So next one, so myrrh. So myrrh is an incense, but it's also some other bits as well. So it's also an ingredient that was used in medicine. So it's got some pain relieving kind of qualities to it. It was some sort of antibacterial sort of aspect to it, apparently. So it was used in that way. So it's put on cuts and yeah, cuts, injuries, those kind of things, to try and promote healing, I guess, so you didn't get infections. It was used as a perfume, so that's where obviously the incense kind of aspect comes from, to a certain extent. And it's also was used in embalming. Okay, so to make, I guess, to get rid of the smell of the bodies potentially. But I did read something about how. No, I won't. I won't go into that. I will describe the plant though, because I found this quite fascinating actually. So obviously it's used as embalming. So what it's really sort of saying is that, you know, Jesus is both, you know, king, and he was the high priest, or is the high priest, I should say, and that it represented suffering and death, basically. Myrrh, yeah. So it comes from this gum resin extract that comes from. I thought this was interesting. So it comes from a thorny tree, and yeah, a thorny and a tree species that's native to arid and rocky regions of the Arabian Peninsula. So that kind of area, you know, where Saudi Arabia is, that kind of area, but it's slightly bigger than that. So it covers modern day Oman, Yemen, and then in North Africa, it would be sort of like Somalia, Ethiopia, Eritrea. And this is an area of, and also this is just my comments as well. It's obviously what was mentioned back in that Isaiah passage was Sheba. Well, I looked up where it said that. I've looked this up previously, so this isn't for this. That Sheba is seen to be around Yemen sort of time. So if you think of Saudi Arabia and that kind of long bit with the Red Sea coming down to a point, you've got Yemen there. So that's where it's thought that you know, the Queen of Sheba that came to see Solomon came from, and was, you know, it's a common thing, isn't it? You know, where somebody says, "Oh, who do you think I am? The Queen of Sheba?" You know, because of the amount of riches that she had. So. Yeah, so Sheba, yeah, so it's been around that sort of Yemen area, but when it's burnt, it has a very bitter smell as well. And from biblical symbology, it represents suffering, death, due to obviously being used for embalming, and also it's used, or was used, let's say, again, I don't know whether it's used now, but used to treat inflammation, treating wounds, as I said, and also used for digestive system. So I just thought that might be something that you're curious about. May not have heard, so I thought I'd go into it. Okay, we're carrying on now, so I'm on to page 17 now. So this is the history of the Persian Magi. Okay, so these are the wise men. Okay, so this is just what they came to be known, as it mentions. Has it mentioned it already? I think it did, yeah. I think it did mention, yeah. A Greek word translated here as wise men is magos. So they were high-ranking officials called the Magi. So here we go into non-biblical stuff now, okay? But this is the ancient church fathers. So ancient church father Julius Africanus, who lived and wrote AD 160 to 240. So Jesus is thought to have died somewhere around 30 to 33. Let's say AD is kind of where the consensus is. It's somewhere in there. And there's lots of people have very, very strong opinions on when that is, but I don't think it's overly relevant. But yeah, so 130 years to obviously 210 years afterwards. Okay, so this is this records the Magi's own account. So this is suggesting that they managed to actually find these wise men, although, you know, and they gave an account of what happened. Okay, so. So recorded the Magi's own account of the Star of Bethlehem and Christ's birth. This account is actually found in the Ante-Nicene Fathers, Volume 6, under Africanus, Existent Writings. Okay, so that's where you would find this. It says, Julius wrote that Cyrus, so this is King Cyrus, who is mentioned in the Bible, of course, as the one who, I think it was him, wasn't it, who instructed the rebuilding of the temple after its destruction. I think it's Cyrus. Again, check these things. Julius wrote that Cyrus commanded a temple to be built to Juno, so one of their gods. Okay, because they're Persians, aren't they? Persians. So again, that Iranian sort of area. In this temple to Juno were many idols of various gods and goddesses made out of gold and silver and all sorts of precious stones. This temple was also contained a hall of records. And these Persian historical public records revealed that the king woke up one night from a strange dream. He went to the temple of Juno to inquire of the priests there. In his dream, the idols in the temple were all arguing because the statue of the goddess Page was found wearing a diadem, which is like a sort of like a crown sort of thing. So wearing a diadem with a carbuncle and an emerald on top. So these are precious stones. A star came down from heaven and rested on the two stones of the diadem for a time, then went further and seated itself on the underside of the diadem. A voice from heaven spoke, saying, "The mighty sun will come to you and be born of you. He who created this world below and all things therein. He is the beginning and the end, the beginning of salvation and the end of perdition." Then the statue of the god Dionysus stated, "Our time is over. He who is before all things has come to the realm of men, and we are merely deceivers." At once all the idols fell down and were no more. The Magi, the wise men, who were skilled in astronomy and dream interpretation, stated that the goddess Page was a queen worshipped in ancient times and was long since dead and buried. But she was also the personification of the constellation Virgo, which is the Virgin. The diadem, in the way it was described, represented the country of the Jews, for they are made of 12 tribes. The emerald and the carbuncle were two of the precious stones found on the breastplate of the Jewish high priest's ephod. So if you don't know about that, have a little look, but it's like a like a square. It had these different gemstones all put in it. They represented the tribes of, so these particular ones, so the emerald and the carbuncle represented the tribes of Levi and Judah, which in turn we were known to represent priesthood and kingship. Okay, because of all the kingly line came through Judah, so that's where all the kings came from, and all the priests, well, they came through the priesthood, which was the tribe of Levi. Okay, the star coming down from the heavens is none other than the deity himself, the creator of all things. So this is what was written in these documents. They then brought out an old scroll which contained a prophecy about the birth of a king marked by a new star. Church Father Origen, in against Celsus, 1.60, chapter 1 verse 60, sorry, that fell out my mind completely, stated that the Magi had a copy of the prophecy of Balaam found in Numbers 24 about the star coming out of Jacob. It was given to them by the great sage Daniel after the time of Cyrus taking the kingdom. So obviously Daniel, the prophet, I had Daniel in my dreams so much, as in the friend Daniel, but I mean the prophecy of Daniel's prophecies and all that sort of stuff so frequently. But Daniel was taken away in the Exodus, of when basically loads of the people from Israel were taken out. I'm pretty sure what they did is they took those that were most valuable, basically, and those that they didn't really contribute towards society in the same way, they just left there. But those that were really had good jobs, would be incredibly useful to the kingdom, then they took them. So all the best of the best went out the country. Anyway, blah blah blah. So Daniel, after the time of Cyrus taking the kingdom. So Origen also stated in Against Celsus, chapter 1 verses 58, that historical records indicated that the Magi were not Chaldeans, but they were Persians. Okay. Chaldeans, so the reason there's a distinction there, sorry, it doesn't mention this, it will mention it somewhere. The Chaldeans were more kind of, what would you say it? say, they did all more like the divination and all kind of stuff that we would see as quite demonic stuff, whereas the Chaldeans didn't. Sorry, wrong way around. The Chaldeans did, the Persians didn't. Sorry. And that's the difference between the ones that came to confirm that they'd seen the Jesus coming here. The Magi remarked that a star had just appeared. The advice the Magi gave the king was to send a delegation to Jerusalem, the capital of Israel, to inquire about the new virgin-born Jewish divine king, again because of the dream that was involving Paige, who was also Virgo, who is the star sign of the Virgin. Okay. The king did exactly that. He sent a delegation of Magi who had studied the Jewish religion and had come to believe in their sacred writings. The rest of what followed in the record is the Magi's own words as to what they found. Okay, so I'm assuming this is it because it's not giving me any kind of quotes after this. So I'm just going to quote here what it says. So it says, so this is meant to be the words of the Magi, it looks like. So when we came to Jerusalem, the sign of the star, together with our arrival, roused all the people. They said, "Why are Persian wise men here? And what is this strange stellar phenomenon?" The chief of the Jews interrogated us by asking, "For what purpose have you come here?" And we said, "Because he whom you call the Messiah has been born." They did not believe us, but did not dare to accuse us of anything. But they said to us, "By the justice of heaven, tell us what you know about this matter." We answered them, "You do not truly believe in him, nor would you believe us even if we swore an oath. You follow your own heedless counsel, because the Christ, the Son of the Most High, is born, and he is the subverter of your law and synagogues. That is why you're acting like you have been stuck by a dart, and are bitter when you hear his name and see what we have suddenly come here because, and see that we have suddenly come here because we truly do believe." Then they took counsel together, urged us to accept their gifts. So they're basically bribing them. Okay. So they took counsel together, as in the Jewish guys, urged us to accept their gifts and tell to no one that such an event had occurred in their land, because it may cause the people to revolt against them. But we replied, "We have brought gifts in his honor, with the view of proclaiming those mighty things which we have witnessed in our country on occasion of his birth. And you dare to bribe us to conceal the things which the divinity, who is above the heavens, has communicated to us, and neglect the commandments of our proper king." And after reconsidering, they gave the matter up. And when the king of Judea sent for us and put to us certain questions, we acted in the same manner until he was thoroughly enraged at our replies. We left him accordingly, without giving any greater heed to him than to any other common person. We came to that place then to which we were sent, and saw the mother and the child, the star indicating to us the royal babe. And we said to the mother, "What is your name, O renowned mother?" And she said, "Mary, sirs." And we said to her, "Where are you from?" And she replied, "From this district of Bethlehemites." Then we said, "Do you have a husband?" And she answered, "I was only betrothed with a certain Sabbath. I was only betrothed when a certain Sabbath dawned. At the rising of the sun, an angel appeared to me, bringing me suddenly the glad tidings of a son. And in trouble I cried out, 'Be it not so to me, Lord, for I have not a husband.' And he persuaded me to believe that by the will of God I should have this son. Then said we to her, 'Mother, mother, all the lords of the Persians have called you blessed. Your glory is great, for you are exalted above all women of renown, and you are shown to be more queenly than all queens.' The child was sitting on the ground, being, as she said, in his second year, and having in part the likeness of his mother. She had long hands and a body somewhat delicate, and her colour was like that of ripe wheat. And she had a round face and had her hair bound up. We brought along with us a servant who was a skillful painter, who painted a portrait of them both, which we brought back with us and placed it in our temple. It is inscribed, to Jove the sun, the mighty God, the King Jesus, the power of Persia, dedicated this. And taking the child up, each of us in turn, and bearing him in our arms, we saluted him and worshipped him, and presented to him gold, myrrh, and frankincense, addressing him thus: We gift you with your own, O Jesus, ruler of heaven. In no other way would these things unordered be ordered, were you not at hand. In no other way could things heavenly be brought into conjunction with things earthly, but by your descent. Such service cannot be discharged if only the servant is sent us, as when the master himself is present. Neither can so much be achieved when the king sends only his satraps to war, as when the king is there himself. It became the wisdom of your system that you should deal in this manner with men. So it's basically talking about bringing heaven and earth together, is basically what it's saying there, and some other bits and pieces. But interesting, isn't it, about the likeness and stuff like that, all of those kind of bits. And the child leaped and laughed at our caresses and words. And when we had bidden the mother farewell, and when she had shown us honour, and we had testified to her the reverence which became us, we came again to the place in which we lodged. That evening there appeared to us one of a terrible and fearful countenance, saying, countenance means facial expressions, saying, Get out quickly, lest you be taken in a snare. And we, in terror, said, Who, O divine leader, could plot against a so heavily armed envoy? Okay, so that's interesting in itself, isn't it? I'll stop there just for a second. So it's talking about, obviously, that they are coming as a massive delegation, like it's saying. So it's not like three guys just turning up. What it's suggesting here is it's a delegation, and they're armed and stuff like that, which would also be why they, they, I suppose, need to greet the king and stuff like that, don't they? Because it was just three guys. Surely just three guys are just going to come in, and is anybody even going to know that they're from Persia, But if they come with a delegation, then people in the area are going to think, hang on a minute, why have we got like a small army coming in here? It's kind of what it's suggesting, isn't it? And that's why, they needed this permission to be had. Look, we're not here to attack, and we're not here to do anything. We're here for this reason. Okay, so I've never really heard that before. I mean, as I said, I've heard about the three wise men not being three men, because that's just been something that, when it's pushed out enough, everybody's like, oh yeah, the three wise men. Yeah, but it doesn't say three wise men. It says about three gifts. You infer that it's three people, but it could have been 100, But anyway, so who owned divine leader could plot against so heavily an armed envoy? And he replied, Herod, but get up straightway and depart in safety and peace. So he immediately departed and brought back home this record of what had happened in Jerusalem, and of Christ our Saviour, who was made known as both God and man. To him be the glory and the power, and to the ages of ages. Amen. Okay, I'm trying to think how far I was going to go. I was going to stop around here. Where did I say? Page 25. Right, so I'm just going to do this last little bit. Yeah. Okay, so this is titled here, How the Science of the Magi is Supposed to Work. Okay, so it's just talking about a couple of bits. So from the Magi's own story and their account presented by Matthew, we learn that the star pattern we call Virgo and the Persians called Page represented a virgin. The constellation Coma a decan of Virgo. Now, a decan is a lesser constellation associated with one of the 12 major constellations. Okay, so back to that again. So Virgo. So the constellation of Coma, let's say a smaller constellation of Virgo, represents the child born of the Virgin. So, if the king had this dream and a star appeared in the constellation of Coma, what would be the conclusion? A divine king has been born of a virgin. Looking to Israel based on the style of the crown, the precious stones, the prophecy of Balaam, and the teaching left by Daniel, who was called the master of the magicians, in brackets, Magi, in Daniel 4:9 and in Daniel 5:11, would mean the Messiah has just been born in Israel. So that's the conclusion they made, from what they saw happen in the sky, this new star, that they saw that as being representative of a king being born. Okay, where are we? And they tied it in with Israel because of the stones and the prophecies and all that kind of stuff. So that's why they went there. So sorry, this little bit as well. This is what Ken's writing about this. So the author. So we see that each constellation and star has a name and represents a specific thing. A conjunction or a comet or a supernova in that constellation would mean the specific thing had just occurred. One day I hope to completely understand the science of the Magi and write it in a book. It's just his commentary. So it's talking about a couple of bits here. So Tertullian, AD 190 to 210, stated in Idolatry, chapter 9, verse 9, chapter 1, verse 9, that astrology is simply a form of idolatry. But he believed that the science of the Magi was totally different from the pagan form of astrology. Okay, Hippolytus, AD 170 to 236, wrote in his Refutation of All Heresies, again this is chapter 4, verses 48 to 49, that not only does Virgo and Coma represent Bible prophecies, but the constellations of Lyra, Corona, the Big and Little Dippers, and other constellations that have prophetic meanings as well. With this in mind, how did we get from a God-ordained pattern to communicate with us to a perverted form like Chaldean astrology? It all starts with pre-flood pagan religion systems. Okay, I'm going to pause there just for 1 second, and then I'm going to go through gods. So it's going to be quite a long video. I had no idea how long it's going to take to read out a book, to be honest. So I'm going to pause it for just 1 second. I just need to check something.